Good evening. Thank you all for coming, and welcome to the University of New Mexico School of Law. It's great to have you here. The School of Law and our Natural Resources and Environmental Law program are proud to sponsor tonight's event with Gina McCarthy, former administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I need to thank several people for their help in organizing this event and making it possible. And I need to start with our guest of honor, Gina McCarthy. We are very grateful that you have come to visit us here in New Mexico and spend the day here with us at the law school, having traveled all the way from Boston, especially with the Red Sox on a hot streak. And the Bruins playing a Game 7 tonight, so, thank you for being here. So our speaker tonight is not only a highly engaging presenter, but a great public servant. And as EPA administrator, she was an extremely important and influential policymaker. If you picked up a newspaper at all during the second Obama administration, you were pretty likely to see her name on the front page. And if you followed environmental law and policy in that era, you know how dynamic her agency was in addressing the big issues in a way that was thoughtful and forward-looking. And if you regard climate change as the defining challenge of our time, you know that Gina McCarthy did as much as anyone to make the United States of America a leader in helping to mitigate its impact on ecosystems and on people. I need to thank several other people and organizations who helped bring you this event. First and foremost, all of us need to thank Hannah Farrington and her advancement team, Melissa Labato, Carmen Rawls. Please give them a hand. This event does not happen without all of their great work. The Natural Resources Journal also deserves a hand for tonight's event. Their editors and staff are volunteering tonight. This is, I should add, the oldest journal in natural resources law, published right here at UNM, and they will be publishing a piece based on tonight's remarks. And also everyone associated with the Natural Resources and Environmental Law program here at UNM. The faculty, the staff, the alumni, the students who make this a program that I hope all of us at the law school and the university can be proud of. And finally, I need to thank Ron Curry and Carl Brooks, a couple of former regional administrators of EPA who served under Gina McCarthy. And so many of you know Ron Curry, grew up here in New Mexico, former Environment Secretary for the state. You may not know Carl Brooks. He, too, was a regional administrator for Region 7 in the Midwest. And so Carl grew up in the West, went to some schools that you may have heard of, Yale, London School of Economics, Harvard, or I guess we're going to be calling it Harvard tonight. He has done so many things. He was a lawyer. He was a state senator in Idaho. He was the director of Idaho's statewide conservation group, which is what he was doing when I met him a few years ago. Yeah. And then a professor of history and environmental studies at Kansas. He's currently a clinical professor at the LBJ School at University of Texas, Austin, and also EPA Region 7 administrator, and then at the end of the Obama administration, the acting assistant administrator for administration. So he has done a lot of things, but in the last year, he has added his most prestigious title, and that is New Mexican. So now living in Santa Fe. So he will be introducing our guest of honor tonight. So thanks again for being here. Please welcome Carl Brooks.
Good evening, folks. As a brand new New Mexican, it is a huge honor to give what I think is my very first public statement as a New Mexican here at the University of New Mexico Law School on the campus, so it's a real honor to be with you. If you look at the crowd and you judge by television appearances, such as Bill Maher recently, you would think that being an EPA administrator or even a former EPA administrator is a guarantee of popularity. You would probably be wrong. Being EPA administrator is usually not a ticket for popularity. It is not a popularity contest. I used to tell folks in Region 7, the Heartland region, if you don't like criticism, you shouldn't be working at EPA. It's that important. The work that we did and the work that they still do at EPA is vital to the American way of life. And if people don't debate that, they're missing one of the most important issues that makes us a free and independent and, I hope, sustainable society. So, if you don't like criticism, don't work for EPA, especially as the administrator. I think a couple members of Congress have told the current administrator that when he's tried to explain why he flies first class, to avoid critics. Really? If you're going to be the EPA administrator, critics come with the job, and it's your job to engage with them, listen to them, explain where you see yourself going and the agency going, and if they're wrong, tell them that in a respectful way. That's the way Gina does it. That's the way that Gina has always run the agency when she was running the AIR program, when I first met her, and then when she became the administrator in 2013. Her style is direct, her style is respectful, her style is well-informed, and her style is really engaged, because she considers these issues that EPA is charged to deal with the most important issues in American life. When we spent time with the students today, it was pretty clear that they thought so too. And as a former college professor, I was really gratified for that. So, Gina's no-nonsense approach, I think you'll see in evidence tonight. I think you'll hear some very thoughtful comments delivered in a really refreshing, really straightforward way. Many of you have been around the university, you've heard very lofty talks, very thoughtful addresses and lectures. What you're going to hear today is somebody who has lived the mission of environmental protection from the community and the neighborhood level on up. And I think that that perspective is one that we dearly need in this country. It's one that Ron and I and all of our colleagues, whether we were political appointees or the 15,000 career staff, treasured about working with Gina. She was a peach to work with. She was an awesome boss, a tremendous colleague, a good friend, and we're just honored as hell that she's here in New Mexico tonight. Gina, thanks so much.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm laughing to myself because, honestly, only someone from Kansas would ever call me a peach. Actually, I've never been called a peach, so this is really cool. You'll probably be thinking of other fruits as we go along. So it's really great. And for some reason, I get all stuff on my glasses when I hugged you. What the heck do you have in your face? Suntan lotion or something? Kind of a goddamn... Oh, anyway, so we'll get ourselves together here. Well, first of all, I am really excited to be at UNH, not only to spend a little bit of time with Carl. What did I say? UNM. That too. You mean I'm not in New Hampshire anymore? I told you I can't see a thing. All right, here we go. At the University of New Mexico, I should just say it, in particular at the law school, I had a blast talking to the class a little earlier. It's been great having some fun with Carl, but also with Ron. I wanted to come here because they're both working together and they continue to fight the good fight. And they always have, and I know they always will, and it was an incredible honor to work with them. And I'm just excited to be here because it's not the first time that I've been in New Hampshire. It's lovely nice. It's not the first time I've been in New Mexico, and I'm glad to be back, so we're going to have some fun. But let me sort of just jump into this because, first of all, I think, having learned a few lessons from the class a little while earlier, that Hannah should come up here and stand behind me and be my translator. Because what I found was that when I say the word hard, H-A-R-D, everyone heard hot, H-O-T. And I really don't want you to misunderstand anything I'm saying. Or maybe I should just begin by saying when I say Harvard, it's H-A-R-V-A-R-D. When I say hard, it's H-A-R-D. And when I say carbon, that's C-A-H-B-O-N. Look it up. All right, look it up. All right, maybe you don't need to come up anymore, Hannah, but I thought I might need you. And raise your hand when you say, she raised her hand and said, nobody knows what you're saying. Shut up. No, you didn't say that. I was thinking shut up. You were saying what you were saying. But let's get into this, because I know that, the best I think I can say is that we live in very uncertain times. I say that rather than saying, God, what is going on in the world these days? But we live in uncertain times, and I have to confess that I spend many hours worrying about all the great people at EPA, including some that are here that are best left not called on, and the great people at EPA that are working, in some of the best dedicated public servants that I have ever met and would ever have the honor to work with. And I worry about whether or not we're going to keep delivering cleaner and cleaner air as we move forward so that we can have really healthy air to breathe. I worry about water quality and quantity. I'm reading about the droughts that you're having these days. And I just sort of, on the whole, worry about the future that we're handing to our kids. And that's probably just a small portion of what I worry about these days, because it's also important to remember that part of the challenges of EPA and others is that they're challenging science itself. Now, I know the lawyers don't think about that every time, but when you want to have somebody testify on an issue, that really means you've got to tell the truth and say what you know, that scientists have always been there. We have had the technical expertise in the United States of America that nobody else has had. And for anybody to denigrate that in order to receive a particular outcome in an issue that they personally care about is upsetting to me. Not to say the fact that we have real challenges in terms of our democracy. So in sum, this is what my mother would say about today. She'd say, Gina, we're going to hell in a handbasket. How cool is that? The best thing I like about that is nobody knows what the hell a handbasket is. Apparently, it is only the destination, not the vehicle, that's important in that sentence, which I like. It's okay. But listen, we all do have to take a little bit of a step back, and I do that to myself every day because I am tired of being anxious and annoyed and downright angry. Seriously, where is Ken? Ken, are you here? My lovely husband, Ken's here. There you are. Ken is here because seriously, every other morning, I wake up to him screaming at MSNBC. Gina, wait till you see what he just said. Look at that tweet. Oh, how many times can one wake up to that? I just tell him, Ken, turn the TV off, get a cup of coffee, play with the dog, let's calm ourselves down, because you just can't be screaming so many times that the science is under attack. It's like yelling, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. They may be, actually. That could be a real issue. I mean, everything's under attack, science and facts, except the Russians who attacked us. So we have issues here. So I don't know if I'm tired, I'm just ticked off, or I'm just incredibly traumatized, but I am just done letting this or any administration in the United States of America tell me that we have to go backwards to go forwards. That is simply not true. So I, for one, am not moping whether I'm in New Hampshire or New Mexico, or don't know which is which. I am not moping. I am going to start walking and talking with a sense of purpose that we do in this country, people who want to pay attention to the facts, who want to pay attention to the science, who want the United States of America to always be the strongest country in the world. And I am going to force people to work together to make our future happen in this country. That's what we all have to do, each and every one of us. Stop talking to yourselves. Talk to one another. Isn't that what we always have done in our lives? I don't care if you disagree with me. I just care if you care that my children's health is as important as your child's health. That's all I care about. Let's work together. Let's talk to one another. It is ridiculous. One of the reasons why I'm at Harvard, that's the Harvard word, and I do say Harvard when I'm there because it really ticks them off. One of the reasons I'm there is because the best thing that I did when I left the administration was to actually do a couple of fellowships at Harvard. And it's not as special a place as it would like to think. But what's special about it is simply that it has young people there. The professors you can keep, the young people are awesome. They are smart. They have access to information about the world that we never had, so they have a sense of understanding, and they have a thirst for social justice that I can only remember back in the 60s. And I say that because I get yelled by everybody my age if I give them too much credit. Honestly, they are just amazing people, and it gives me hope. And what I try to do to them is explain to them that you need to operate in the real world, which is where you've always been, not the crazy-ass world of Washington, D.C. You can get angry and upset about it, but the real world you have to think about, and you have to follow, and you have to stay hopeful and engaged. The world belongs to them. They have to grab it. And so it's been the most wonderful thing to think about, because all of these issues, we just have to keep in mind a couple of things. We have to keep in mind that if we continue to work together, we will continue to make progress no matter what happens in Washington, D.C. Because I hate to be disrespectful to anybody that thinks Washington, D.C. is the real world. I have to tell you, it really isn't. The real world is here. The real world is at this school. The real world is all about grassroots organizations. It's about building change from the bottom up. Nobody has ever changed the world from Washington down. That's not the way it works. So while we have great ideas in Washington, generally they came from 20 years of hard work at grassroots organizations to get attention to what's really happening in our community. And those communities got so obnoxious that states had to say, oh crap, I got to do something. And then they do something. And then states get so obnoxious that the federal government marches in and finds the solution, which is exactly what the grassroots organizations have been telling them for 20 years. So let's calm down about Washington, D.C., and let's pay attention to our own communities, our own states, about what's happening in the real world. Because I'm simply not going to tune out, and I'm not going to let myself get down, because too much is at stake. We cannot allow our country to be split by those who think they got a job and only have to deal with half of us or a quarter of us. Because that's not democracy. We're not of, by, or for one constituency. And the environmental world has never, ever, ever been a partisan issue. And we cannot allow it to become one, because it doesn't discriminate between Republicans and Democrats when it's all about breathing clean air and drinking clean water. While we may argue in Congress with the Republicans when I was there in all these heated hearings, but I never heard one of them say, I'm perfectly fine with my kids breathing dirty air. So let's get over it. And if you remember correctly, the early movers and shakers in the environment were actually not the Democrats. I love the Democrats dearly, but you should add a better one than Teddy Roosevelt, because he beat you to it. He started the national park system. And guess who actually started EPA? Now, let me give you a clue. He was the best president ever. All right, you must know already, right? Richard Nixon. He did one good thing. Congratulate him for it. And George H.W. Bush actually signed and pushed the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990, which is the premier public health bill that has ever been passed in any country. It has saved millions of lives and trillions of dollars and grown huge amounts of business and jobs in this country, and we should all be proud that he did it. But you know why? Because he was making up for the problems of the prior administration, which is what happens when you pull an elastic like this and they say let go, it goes way over here, or else it doesn't balance out. And that's exactly why George Bush had to give the creds back to the Republicans, and he moved that forward. So don't allow us to be dividing the actual core values of our country because they've decided somewhere along the line that we had to call them Democratic or Republican. Because I hate to tell you this, but I have worked for one Democratic governor and 5 Republican governors. And each one of those governors was invested in their own families, in their own kids, and they decided that they would be held accountable. Did I ask them to do crazy-ass things? Once in a while. Saner heads would prevail. But I didn't. Because the weird thing about it is, when you actually make people's lives better, they enjoy it. They like to drink clean air. Who knew? I'm sorry, breathe clean air, drink clean water. If you breathe water, it's actually painful. So listen, here's the situation. Now, I know we have the challenge of climate change, and I know that has become one of the fundamental platform issues for Republicans these days. And I know on the same side of the Democrats wanting movement moving forward. And I think one of the challenges we have with this administration in particular is they're challenging the science on climate simply because they don't want to deal with the fact that climate means changes that they don't want to see happen. Now, I'm not going to tell you why that is. You can all guess, and we all have our theories. But the challenge we have today is that all of the great bills and laws that were put into action back in the 70s, when so much of what EPA does today is about, happened at a time when it was easy to see pollution, when it was right in front of your face, when you couldn't deny it and it was not going to go away until you took action. And then you deal with challenges that we're facing today. Emerging contaminants that are ending up in our drinking water, as if it's a big surprise when we have harmful algal blooms that are 600 miles long in the Ohio River. Well, they're there and they're happening. We just don't see them, we don't taste them until the water gets shut off. That's when you have to face it. And the challenge of climate change is even more extreme because you have the challenge of not being able to articulate the issue in a way that is relevant to normal human beings. They actually think it's about the health of the planet. Stop talking about the health of the planet. The planet could give, I'll be polite. The planet doesn't care if the climate is changing. It remains a planet. The challenge we have is that we should care because people may not be living on the planet. That's the point. So stop talking about polar bears and birds and bunnies. That's why I'm at the School of Public Health. EPA is a public health agency. I have never articulated benefits like I articulate the benefits to public health when I go out and talk about the work that we're doing at EPA. I've never counted the bunnies. Now, for all of you students who are ready to tweet about how horrible I am about bunnies and probably eat them, stop it. I love bunnies. They're cute as a bunny. I just don't do that work. And so the same thing we need to think about with climate change, which is why I'm at the School of Public Health to say that if we are going to invest billions of dollars on how do we develop in a sustainable way, how do we deal with the fact that there are going to be 9.6 billion people on the earth in 2050, 2/3 of them are going to live in the urban areas, and we are 70% short of the food supply that we would need to keep people healthy. How do we deal with that? That is going to take a different way of thinking about the world. But if we could just look at that question through the public health lens, I will guarantee you that you will have the developing world running to those answers instead of pointing at the United States for dropping out of the Paris Agreement. Because it means instead of New Delhi having millions of people die, you will have clean air to breathe. And as a result of that, you're going to drive down the carbon, CAHBON pollution that is fueling climate change. That's what we have to think about. We have to tell people that climate change isn't about birds or bunnies or polar bears. We have to tell Al Gore to stop doing Antarctic and Arctic issues and start holding a child and saying, this is what it's all about. It's about your children, your families, and your future. That's how you cut through the partisan politics of today. And you have to be with me in talking to the scientists about getting a little bit better at how they talk about science. Now, I'm sure when you all grow up to be really good lawyers, you'll be scratching your head, wondering how I can find a scientist that speaks English, but they exist and would like them to exist more. And this is what I tell them when they talk about climate change. So repeat after me. This is all you need to know. 3 things about climate change. Are we ready? Climate change is real. Man-made emissions are causing it. That's why women need to rule the world. That's it. That's it. I don't think I need to say more. I mean that passionately. But listen, as far as I can see, there has been a lot of discussion about going backwards. This is the first administration that I know in history whose sole vision for the future is to undo the prior administration's vision, right? It sort of drives me crazy, I'll admit that. As my mother would say, it's not a drive, it's merely a putt. It is a short distance to craziness from where I normally exist. But here's the issue. They talk a lot about it, but they are terrible at doing it. So let's celebrate terribleness, shall we? Let's celebrate this. First of all, instead of embracing the career staff, and there are some here like Jim and others who know everything about everything, they're locking themselves up and they're building some kind of cone of silence that they live in. And God forbid they have to fly and coach where all of us horrible human beings who are ready to kill people actually fly, like all my family, all my friends, and myself. But here's the issue. If you don't talk to the career staff, if you don't work with people, if you don't follow public process and understand what the public wants and needs, then you are not going to be able to undo final rules that have followed the law, followed the science, and benefited from tremendous public outreach. You are simply not going to succeed. And your rules actually have to have some semblance of what is going on in the real world. So don't worry so much about rollbacks and instead focus on what's going on in the real world. Because change is happening, folks. Really, really good change. Do I care about the Clean Power Plan potentially being rolled back? Of course I do. Do I think they're going to succeed? No. Their proposal had 11 pages of arguments, 11 pages of legal arguments. Now, there are a lot of lawyers here. How many pages of legal arguments, if someone came to you and slipped on a banana peel in a supermarket, wouldn't you at least have 100? A sore hip versus the future of mankind, you do more than 100, right? It's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing to them. But the other really embarrassing thing should be that the Clean Power Plan was, I think, a great step forward, and I hope it continues. But its basic value was to go out to 2030 and provide business certainty. That's what its value was. To say that the United States of America cares about this, and you're going to have to pay attention to this as a utility. But you know what's really funny about it? Is that all of the utilities continue to invest just like the Clean Power Plan already existed. And they've said it. The two biggest CEOs announced, when the president announced that this was going to be all rolled back, they said, oh, it won't make any difference to me. Guess what? Clean energy is cheap. It's the economy, stupid. It's happening. It's happening faster than anyone could ever have imagined. Our real challenge with clean energy is to make sure that it's not just available to people with means, but it has to be available to every human being in this country and beyond. That's the challenge. And people are being creative. I'm on the Connecticut Green Bank Board, and we're doing everything in the world to think about financial strategies that allow everybody to benefit from clean energy. And when we do, it's going to be really hard to say, oh, never mind, I'd prefer coal. You go for that. Give me that argument. I will win every time. Not a legal one, but a common sense one. And if you look at transportation, which is the next big chunk that we get to do, if you don't think automated vehicles are going to be here, I would challenge your thinking. They are here, and they're here to stay. Now, Ken and my children think that that's a very good thing for me personally because I stink at driving. I would argue for him the entire city of Boston has that challenge. Everybody in Massachusetts drives like massholes, as people would say. It happens. But the thing to remember is that if you do automated vehicles, or you do more public transportation, or you recognize that electric vehicles are actually going to be the choice in the world, you will be able to envision a world of cleaner air. You will be able to envision a world with less fossil fuel dependence. You'll be able to look at clean energy as the strategy of the future, not just for us, but for developing countries right now that will be the majority of greenhouse gas emissions in the future if we don't do something about it. That's the real world I want students to look at. That's the vision for the future. That's the hope that I want them to have. Because if we only sit around and mope, then we will convince them that we are not just the biggest slugs in the world, but that government is dysfunctional and democracy doesn't work. It is not true. Democracy is a great and the best form of government, but it is a participatory sport. So get out, vote, talk to one another. You know, my mother and my dad used to say to me when I complained as a kid about this, that, and the other thing, because I was always complaining, as I still do. They used to say to me, okay, Gina, enough, stop whining. Why don't you just pull up your big girl pants and do something? So that's what I say to everybody out there. Pull up your big girl pants, your big boy pants, or your gender neutral pants, and do something, and we will all be better for it. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. I will. Okay, we have people with microphones, I think. Could you raise your hands, your microphones? Thank you very much. Now all we need is if you bring a microphone up, I'll ask a question and they can answer. That would really be the best. That's the way I like to do it. I'm sorry. No one said it had to be Q&A. It could be A and Q. All right, if anybody has a question, that'd be great. Just raise your hand and we'll grab a microphone and we'll do about 20 or 25 minutes. Right there.
Thanks, Gina.
You're welcome.
Talk to me about fracking and your views on fracking and what our grassroots strategy should be on all that.
That's a really big question. Could you put that in more context? No, I'm just kidding. I read a really interesting op-ed in, was it Santa Fe Times? Was it last week? What? Yeah. It was an op-ed. I mean, it talked a little bit about this. You know, I have done a lot of work with Governor Hickenlooper. I think that states need to have regulations that are stringent on fracking. I will absolutely readily admit that without inexpensive natural gas, our ability to move forward with really strong regulations that reduced air pollution and address climate change would have been much more difficult to do because it changed the economic dynamic considerably to have inexpensive natural gas. That does not mean that just because you did a good thing that you go scot-free and that you don't have the same basically obligations that other industry sectors have, which is you don't contaminate the groundwater, you don't release methane, especially when it's your product, and it's not just cost effective, but it makes you money to save it. That makes sense to me. It's the economy, stupid, right? So I think the industry itself has to grow up just a little bit and figure out how it becomes its own savior. How does it address these issues in a concerted way? And I think Colorado's done a good job. I think the rules that we put together on methane for existing facilities are important to implement and to stand behind. And I do think there are ways in which you can continue to look at natural gas in the future, but there is a time limitation for fossil fuels given what science tells us we need to do. All right? They said I told the truth, so I do. Okay, we got one down here and we got one over here. If you want to bring this down here.
How do you think college campuses can lead the charge in these difficult times as far as sustainability and in regards to renewable energy?
Yeah. Well, I think college campuses are important, and let me make in that context. Let me make a larger point, and one that there is a lot going on sustainability and in the climate world in the U.S. Cities are really where it's at right now, and I think colleges that work with their own communities become very powerful forces. And so the cities many mayors are moving forward because they can't run away from the issues of climate. You know, President Obama, one of my favorite sayings that he reiterated a number of times was that climate change, it was, this is the first generation to feel the impacts of climate change and the last to do something about it. And I think it should be enormously powerful to people, especially if young people get involved. You are our conscience. You tell us about what you need. You are the people that we should be working for. And I think there are opportunities going on college campuses to actually develop sustainability plans, to look at not just at divestment, but investment, which I think is really cool. This state is actually, unlike New Hampshire, really wealthy in terms of renewable energy potential that could be enormous. Updating a renewable fuel standard to look at what's available to you now and at what cost would be gigantic. Every college student who turns 18 better register to vote and start voting, or don't come and talk to me about your commitment. That's the other thing. So there's so many things you can do, but I would venture that it's not just within the four walls of your university, but it is within the context of your own communities. Get out and do work in communities. Understand what is happening, the struggles people are facing. The best thing I ever did in public service was to start at the local level, because you can't ignore people. They have needs that are well beyond the exact issue that you're talking about. And if you fail to think about that, then you fail to serve the public rather than just their lungs. And it doesn't work that way. So get out, have some fun, push, get active, comment on rules, get mad, vote for people that you think don't stand for your values. That's the whole shebang. And the other interesting piece for me is I'm not just working at Harvard, but I'm also working for this private equity company out of New York called Pegasus Capital Advisors. Now, I'm doing this for two reasons. One is that I felt like I needed to learn the business world because I never understood why investments weren't pouring in to areas that I saw as having so much value. And I'm not sure I've answered that educational process for myself. But the reason why I went with this company is they invest in sustainability and wellness. They are way out in front on talking about how the investment community needs to not just worry about shareholders, but worry about social issues, governance issues. And I think there is an opportunity today like never before to actually move issues through the private sector and get action in a way that government can't keep up and can't do as quickly as it needs. And that's what I want to see happen. Toxics issues are a clear example of that. They can move in ways that too much science is needed in order to address the issue quickly. So there's nothing wrong with working for businesses, is my point. You can actually make a huge difference in how business expresses their own values. And with social media, you are holding businesses accountable in a way that you've never done before. And don't think that those CEOs don't see it. Because when the CEO of Uber was on an economic advisory board for this president, and all of the people that had those apps found that out, lots of those apps went, and he left as well that economic advisory board. So you have powers today. You just need to use them wisely. But businesses are beginning to understand that they better wear their social values on their sleeve before somebody portrays their social values for them. So there's so many good things happening. All right, I'll give a shorter answer next time, I promise.
Thank you.
Right back there. Did you go yet?
No, not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Up here too, and then one back there. Sorry, it's coming. Very quick. Right there. Right. Oh, all right. Go here first. Whatever. Yes.
Thank you very much for your insights and your commentaries. In terms of envisioning hope, as you projected, it seems that in this country we suffer from prevention deficit disorder. So how do we get schools of public health to get these essential messages back to the community level in the midst of all the issues and things that are going on with the medical industrial complex? Prevention is better than cure.
I have to write that down. Prevention
Be my
deficit
guess.
disorder. That's good. All right, you'll hear that next time. I heard it somewhere. I think New Hampshire. There was a guy in New Hampshire that was really good. Yeah. You know, this is what I did a keynote at a conference for public health folks at BU just last Friday. And I told them that this is the moment to actually make that point. Because my thing is that you're not going to ignore the challenge of climate change. You must adapt to it. You have to. It's already very clear to human beings. I don't walk around and hear everybody mumbling about how climate change isn't happening. They're mumbling about, will somebody do something about it? And I think there is an opportunity here to actually make the public health community's voice much louder and to also get the attention of healthcare community. I can give you a really quick, I said I was going to give a shorter answer. Damn, one more point. When Puerto Rico, the hurricane in Puerto Rico hit, the one thing that people don't talk about is that most of the people left. Many, many people left. A lot of kids. And Children's Hospital was inundated by all kinds of kids from Puerto Rico needing care. And it cost them millions of dollars that FEMA doesn't reimburse because that's not really their problem, right? And what I told everybody at Children's, and now I'm at Harvard, I said, hello, you have plans for how to deal with emergencies when two buses hit one another? There's a system for how you move care around and you do this. Are you paying at all attention to climate change? Are you looking at the fact that the healthcare sector is 7% of the problem in this country? They're not doing anything to think about how they actively participate in the issue of climate change for their own benefit, to be able to allow people to reach hospitals when there is an emergency. How to make sure that all of your HVAC system isn't on the bottom floor and you're on the coastline that's going to be inundated with the next storm. So we have an ability, I think, to get attention to these issues as we haven't before. And that's why I want to take all the money that's invested in climate and use it for the actual prevention issues that will go well beyond what one needs to do for climate. I don't want to have my kids continue to live on this planet. I want them to be healthy when they're doing it and live long lives. And that's what prevention can bring you. Okay, back there and then one up here.
Hi, Gina. Can you
Hi.
comment on the current administrator's criticism of the lack of the federalism, cooperative federalism between the feds, the state, local jurisdictions, and hammering out what needs to be done? And then secondly, the other criticism is that the current administrator would like to provide more quote-unquote clarity. So if you could comment on those two issues with regard to what the work that you had done and what is being proposed now. Thank you.
Clarity, okay. How do I answer this? I've been so good so far, I think. From my standard, I've been really good. Cooperative federalism is something I've heard a lot. And one of the most fun things I did, actually, was I spent a lot of time with Western governors, a lot of time, because it was an area that I needed to get much more familiar with the thinking, and they would movers and shakers on a lot of things. And I wanted to understand it, and cooperative federalism is their mantra. And everybody can define that in different ways. Nobody can disagree with cooperative federalism. You know, my goal wasn't to grow up and be the EPA administrator. When I was working for the state government, I thought EPA was a pain in the ass. They were. But guess what? That's part of cooperative federalism. It's called you can't do something that takes away the ability of people in another state to live healthy lives. We don't regulate for the fun of it. We regulate because our system of democracy demands that every human being can pursue the right to health and happiness. And if you're taking away my right to that, then someone ought to regulate that, right? And one of the fun things I did was go to the Western Governors meeting right after the Clean Power Plan. And I went to them and I announced it as the most cooperative federalism rule that has ever been done. And they looked at me 12 ways to Sunday. But it was designed to allow every state to solve their own problems in whatever way they wanted, and EPA would support them. That's cooperative federalism. It's not demanding the answer, but it's demanding that there be solutions to protect everybody's rights. That's what cooperative federalism is to me. And so the idea that this administrator appears to have, that the idea of cooperative federalism is for the federal government to not play at all, but allow states to do what they want, is what led New England to be the tailpipe of the Midwest states that didn't want to regulate their own industry because the stacks would send the pollution to New England instead. That can't happen. That's not cooperative federalism. So I do not know what statutes he's reading as the Attorney General, but he should have read a little more clearly, because that's not what it is. We work with states all the time, as Ron and Carl knows. We tried our best to forge relationships, to understand what was important to them, to allow them to dictate priorities that were important to them as long as it continued our mission moving forward. We made, I think, great strides forward in working with our states. Ones we delegated things and the ones that we had to do the enforcement. And we did it, I think, with as much grace as we could. But it doesn't mean you avoid challenges or your responsibilities. So on the second thing with the clarity issue, I'm not exactly sure which particular one you're talking about, but I do know that he views science differently than I do. He actually questions whether or not climate change is real, thinking that we need more evidence and we should debate it instead. That would be interesting. I've told everybody that I think we should have a debate. You should have one denier and 99 climate people talking to them. That would be a suitable debate for me, because that's about how it marries out. But I do think that, I think the challenge he has is that it's just a very clear attempt to get science that he doesn't like off the table, so he doesn't have to deal with it. But the courts won't see it that way. It's science that we've relied on for years, and it's peer-reviewed, sound science, and that's what you're going to have to follow. And so that's another significant challenge that he has moving forward if his decisions are based on those types of thinking. So I disagree with him on both of those issues, as you might guess. All right, one more question. Yes, the front of the room.
What are your thoughts on a carbon tax? Practical, not practical, politically feasible?
You know, I never usually answer those questions because I think it's really important for me now to sort of step back and criticize instead of providing any solutions. Hey, I was in the solution set for a long time. I can just bitch and moan, right? All right, I'll give you my opinion. I was part of a team that designed the regional greenhouse gas emissions program and the initiative in New England. It's called RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and it's been enormously successful. It's 9 states. It's now going to be 10 now that New Jersey's back, and it might likely be 11. Virginia's considering it, and there's been analysis of it, and it's saved trillions of dollars and huge amounts of greenhouse gases. And it was mostly because we asked it to invest in energy efficiency, which does that. It keeps prices low and it saves money and it grows jobs, and so I think it's great. I just think it's complicated. I actually like the idea of putting a price on carbon. I think it could be fair and equitable. The challenge that I have with that is that there needs to be a mechanism in any law that allows it to be updated according to the science without going back to Congress. Because no matter what price you put on it today for a ton, you're going to find that you'll need to rethink that moving forward. And without that piece in there, then you could end up with too weak momentum moving forward in having taken away the ability to selectively take other additional action. So I love the idea. I think it's fair. I think it makes sense as long as Congress doesn't start carving out their favorite friends when you apply it. But I think the challenge is going to be to have a fair and equitable public process to pay attention to the science and see whether or not increases in that price need to happen, or wouldn't it be great? Less money is necessary to do it. All right, everybody, I know I've spoken longer than I should. One more question or done? Done? You're the boss, Hannah. Don't look around. You know you are. Is this it?
We're done.
All right, we're done. All right, everybody, thank you very much. And I love New Mexico.
Thank you. Well, if you didn't get a laugh out of that, and if it didn't give you something to think about, then thank you so much again for being here. Please have one more round of applause for Gina McCarthy. We are going to take just a couple of photos on stage, and then please stay around and mingle, and thank you all again for being here this evening.